Hey, what's up guys? Day 2 back in the shop working on Frank's 325i. Today we're going to be assembling a lot of the front end of the motor. We're going to show you how my accessory drive goes together with the BMW power steering pump and the GM alternator. We're also going to be covering a lot of the plumbing to the BMW radiator to the ALS motor. Another thing we're going to do in this video is answer a lot of the common questions that I get during the swap. So what kind of car to look out for, how my mounts work, what oil pan do I need, what accessory drive do I need, what are my transmission options, what ECU do I use. There's a lot of questions guys have about the car. How do all the electronics work after everything's removed? Do I lose my windows? Do I lose my headlights? Does everything just stop working? So we're going to cover all that in this video. Let's get to it.
All right, so as far as the accessory drive goes, this is what you'll receive in the kit. We have 2 powder coated brackets, all the hardware you need to mount it, spacers for the BMW power steering pump, idler pulley, and hardware for the alternator. All right, so for the accessory drive bracket, first thing you want to do is mount up these 2 brackets with a 2-inch spacer in between the plates. And then on this car, since we're using an F-body spacing, these are 1-inch spacers that are going to go between the bracket and the head. So these are the top 2 bolts on the head. Still have the bottom 2. These are going to get same bolts and a different combination of spacers because they go straight to the head. So if you get everything mounted up here with this just loose, you can get all the spacers in place easily, and then you can snug everything down to the head. So the bottom 2 bolts get the same front spacer, which is 2-inch, and then the rear one on these is 1.25 inch. So the combination of this 2-inch and then plus the 1-inch spacer and a 1/4 inch bracket, and then down here is a 2-inch spacer and a 1 1/4 inch spacer, so they're parallel. On a truck accessory drive, these 2 rear spacers are different. This will be a 2-inch and this will be a 1.75 inch. Once everything's up here with the spacers, you can go ahead and bolt the alternator in place now that you're not fighting everything being tight. So once this stuff's bolted in here, we can go ahead and bolt in the power steering pump. This is going to be mounted with the included hardware and 1/2 inch spacers. The 1/2 inch spacer is going to go between the power steering pump and the bolts here. Alright, so the BMW power steering pump bolts in right there. You go ahead and tighten up these 3 bolts before you put the pulley back on, because you won't access them once the pulley's in front of it. The next thing that needs to go on is the idler pulley right here. So the idler pulley comes with an aluminum spacer, a SEP spacer that goes on the front of the pulley, bolt, the aluminum spacer, and that goes on here. So once you have everything bolted in, you go ahead and tighten everything up.
You need to get what's that, baby too, right? Because all it is the sheet, and then all you do is dip it in straight.
So then the last thing you need to do is put your BMW pulley back on.
No, some hunters. Need some bitumen, Frank.
You can bolt that back in with the stock hardware. The accessory drive is done. You get plenty of clearance on the back side of the head, past the coils, the power stud, and this is a large style truck alternator.
This hole pattern matches F-body alternators, truck alternators, basically any LS alternator other than a Corvette style. A Corvette uses a different hole pattern here, center to center. It's a little wider. That goes for a Corvette or any Corvette style accessory drive, like an LS3 Camaro, anything with an LSA on it. So you need to use the F-body or truck style alternator. So there's a few things I wanted to cover about the swap kits. There's a bunch of common questions I get. The first one is the pan. This is a poor man's performance swap pan. It's equivalent to the Holley part number, I believe, is a 302-1. They sell two different versions, but it's the one with the flatter bottom. The poor man's pan is a little cheaper option. It comes with everything you need, minus a windage tray, but you can use a truck windage tray. It clears the stock cross member pretty well. The mounts were pretty much built around this, so that's my suggestion for that. A lot of guys ask if you can use an F-body pan. I haven't personally tried one, but you do have a few inches of clearance here between the K-member and the pan, and an F-body pan has a little bit bigger sump. If you guys have used a truck pan with a cut bottom, that works as well, but for the price, you can't beat this pan. For the starter, I mentioned this quickly in the first video, but you need to use a new body style starter, which is a late model truck, 2008 and up, Silverado starter. It's a lot shorter and it clears the mount on the backside. If you use an F-body or early generation truck starter, the solenoid hits the mount. The next thing that comes up a lot is the transmission. So whether or not you're going with a manual, you can use a F-body T56, or you can use a 5th gen Camaro style TR6060. Both of those transmissions will work with this style transmission mount. It's adjustable front to back, about 3 inches, and has a universal pattern in the center. So you can either use a single bolt mount or the 2-bolt mount like the T56 uses in this car. The other option is a automatic. I offer a transmission cross member for a 4L80, which uses this hole on the passenger side and the front hole, and the driver's side is very similar to this. It has a little less drop in it, and you also are required to trim some of the area in the tunnel for the pan, as well as where the electrical connector is on the 4L80 transmission that's on the driver's side. Another one of the common questions I get is swapping an X-Drive or an all-wheel drive car. The mounts that I offer right now are designed around a 2-wheel drive car. The subframe, as well as the transmission tunnel, is different in an X-Drive. So currently that's not an option. Asking about the accessory drive. So there's a few different options you can do here. If you're familiar with the LS motors, you know there's various different drives, different spacings on the crank pulley. This car is an F-body spacing, which is compatible with my mounts with a different set of spacers. So on the website, if you have an F-body crank pulley and water pump, you just select F-body on checkout, and I'll include the correct spacers for the accessory drive like we explained in this video. The other option is a truck spacing accessory drive, where you can use the truck crank pulley, and I suggest an L99 water pump. It has the water outlet on the driver's side, and that makes the routing to the top port on the radiator a little easier in the BMW, since it's also on the driver's side. The other accessory drive that's available off of one of the GM motors is a Corvette spacing. The issue with that, with my brackets, is the BMW power steering pump becomes very close to the cylinder head with that spacing. So if you're going to use a Corvette pullout and a Corvette accessory drive, you're better off just keeping the Corvette accessories and modifying the power steering lines to accept the GM power steering pump. So as far as the AC compressor, there's plenty of room in the chassis for the GM style AC compressor and mount. In this car, we'll be using an F-body
bracket and mount, and it'll be driven off the rear drive just like a factory car would be.
Exhaust manifolds. This is an issue we run into with the swaps as well. We found out that the Gen 5 Camaro stock manifolds work really well. They clear the steering shaft on the driver's side in stock configuration. These work pretty well for turbo builds. We're going to do a rear crossover, or on this car we're going to do a rear turbo kit. It's a good option. If you're going to do an NA car, CX Racing builds a set of mid-length headers for the cars. They fit around my mounts as well as the stock steering shaft. Which ECU should I use? Should I use the stock GM 0411 or P59? Should I use a Holley? Should I use an E38 late model PCM? Megasquirt? There's a lot of different options, but by far the easiest way to get one of these cars running is with the Holley Terminator X Max. I showed you how simple it is to wire it up in the first video. You literally just have to hook up a couple constant powers, a ground, an ignition wire, 4 wires to the stock drive-by-wire pedal, and it'll fire right up. You get a wideband, you get a small display where you can see coolant temperature, boost, air, fuel. Don't try to save the $100 and buy the kit that doesn't include this. It's a great option for the money. Definitely my recommendation is just to go with the Holley off the bat. You can't beat it. One of the other big concerns a lot of people have with swapping one of these cars is what happens to all the electronics. What happens when you remove the stock ECU? How do you make the CAN network work once the DME is removed? What functionality do you lose? Well, the reality is once you remove the DME, the car basically works just like it always did. So when you get in on the cars after it's swapped, the key still works like normal. Once you wire up the starter, like I explained in the first video, the starter button will work fine. The radio, steering wheel buttons still work. HVAC controls, turn the ignition on. Cluster still works. Still have a working fuel gauge. The speedo works off the ABS system, so it works perfectly fine. The functionality you lose is the tach, and on this car it has an MPG gauge, so both of those will become functioning with my CAN adapter. It takes the data from the Holley, sends it to the BMW CAN bus, makes the tach work. AC control is something we're gonna explore in this car as far as controlling the stock compressor, but as far as heat and fan control, everything works like normal. Radio works, steering wheel buttons work like I said. Lights work just like normal. Windows work. The reality is you don't lose any functionality. The car doesn't care that the DME isn't there anymore. It still works the same way. Heater core lines, you use the 5/8 and the 3/4 barbs off the stock LS pump, and you're going to run them down, in our case around the AC compressor, across the K-member and up. You want to tie into the 3/4 inch line, the stock one that leads over to the thermostatic valve that's down here on the strut tower, and then the 5/8 one is going to run up to the top port on the firewall. stock radiator, you have the oil cooler that you're gonna delete. There's a couple torque bolts that you gotta take out. We had already taken 2 out here on the car. And this is gonna pull out. And what you're gonna be left with is there's one water port that went to the cooler on the radiator. Since we're not gonna be using this anymore, what we're gonna do is cut this hose and we're gonna plug it and perma-clamp it. The other thing you can do is like tap this plastic fitting or this plastic fitting. I just don't want to crack anything, so it's easiest to plug a rubber hose and then bolt this back in there to plug up that port. So on that water port, what we're going to do is cut this clamp because it's a permanent crimped clamp. Pull this off of here. Then we're going to use a heater core cap. Put this back on, perma clamp it. That way we have a way to plug up that water port in the radiator. Maybe the BMW guys are a little more familiar with this stuff, but when I first did it, I couldn't figure out how the radiator was held in the core support. It's these little Torx plastic screws right here. You have to back out. So what you do is you have to go set the radiator in here. Make sure you have your rubber insulators on the bottom of the radiator on either side. They set on these little plastic brackets. Hook up my top AC line right now since it kind of holds it in place. Then you need to hook up your power steering cooler lines over here. Then when you put your front core support in, you got to back these all the way out. I just like to take them out so they're out of the way. Slide in. And tilt your radiator back until that lines up with the hole, and then you can run those plastic screws. AC compressor, the F-body setup and stock manifold fits really well. These hard lines are connected to the back of the compressor, and that's all stock F-body, like a 98 through 02 Camaro V8 car. So the idea here is to use the BMW lines are going to go into the top port of the condenser. The F-body line needs to be adapted using the BMW connector on the lower port of the condenser. So what we're going to do is cut this hose off, get a union and connect it to the hard line from the BMW. And then on the other side, the F-body hose has this end, which again we're going to cut this off, get another union, and union this with the soft line that comes off of the evaporator port on the firewall.
That should about do it for this video. We showed you how to assemble the front end of the motor, including the accessory drive and a little bit of plumbing that's required if you're going to run an F-body accessory drive and water pump. Everything worked out pretty nice. We've got the AC compressor mounted, most of the plumbing for the overflow done, and the front end of the car back on. We also answered a lot of the common questions guys have, but I'm sure more will come up. So feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them in future videos. Next time, we're gonna cover the transmission, shifter, drive line, and try to take this thing for its first drive. See you then.